Well, hi everyone. Welcome to AI for UX. This is the space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations for user experience. And I'm John Whalen, the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology-driven product innovation firm. So I've struggled with keeping up with all the new AI tools for UX research and discovery, and I'm guessing I'm not alone, and that's why I started this. In each installment, we speak to a founder of one of the latest AI-enhanced research tools and dive into its inspiration and how it might benefit you. And just to note, these are not product endorsements. Brilliant pays full price for any technologies we use, and no one's getting paid. It's just to help us all learn about new technologies together. So with that, let's get started. And I'd like to welcome Axel. So Axel is the founder of Wondering, a tool that makes product decisions faster with AI-first user interviews, surveys, and concept tests. So thank you so much for doing this. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much, John. Looking forward to chatting.
Cool. Well, let's dive into Wondering. And we actually were very intrigued at Brilliant, and tried it and are learning. And so tell us who you feel is your sort of ideal target audience for Wondering.
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense to touch on what we started. So I myself
Mm-hmm.
used to be a product manager at a quickly growing sort of e-commerce company in the UK. And when I was there, we really struggled often to get the type of insight that we needed to make decisions effectively. We tended to sort of think of things in bets, and that just really meant that we didn't have enough data to make decisions effectively. And once we'd ship things, often we'd find that we'd had some misassumption about what customers wanted. So Wondering really exists to make it easier to make those type of decisions, to help product teams and user research teams effectively make decisions that are based on sort of truth and an understanding of customers and their intentions and needs and wants and pain points. And that's what we sort of optimize.
Yeah, and just sort of specifically, how does sort of what's the target thing it tries to address specifically, and what sort of how does your product help with that?
So we help companies get these type of insights and make these decisions using the methodologies on our platform. So we tend to think about them as sort of methodologies that you might be familiar with. So user interviews, surveys, concept tests. So we've sort of rebuilt them to take into account things that large language models are really good at. So for example, our user interviewing tool will be a tool that companies that want to conduct traditional user interviews might use, but instead of a human having to moderate the conversation, they'll essentially instruct an AI to moderate the conversation in a sort of semi-structured format, essentially. So anything that you might use user interviews for, do concept tests for, surveys with, that's the kind of stuff that we'll help customers with.
Hmm. No, that makes perfect sense, and it's very cool that you've managed to do multiple of those things. So what's a typical scenario that your product teams or UX researchers and so on are using your tool with right now?
We support customers in getting and interviewing customers essentially in a few different formats, but often one of the things that customers really super often is sort of in product research. So customers can integrate our product into their website, for example, and then actually run their studies natively in the moment with their customers. So if you're a company trying to improve maybe the conversion rate on your sort of sign up flow, often you really need to understand what is breaking there. And to do that, you need to speak to customers who are actually going through that flow. So with our product, they can then deploy these methodologies to customers that are in their website and get like very targeted feedback back
Mhm.
really quickly.
Yeah, and actually, I guess one thing I was wondering is we've actually had the luxury of interviewing a couple folks who have moderation tools, but it strikes me that yours is a little different than the others. So can you just tell me a little bit about what makes Wondering a little unique?
Yeah, I mean it's a very quickly evolving space, and there's a lot being built in the sort of intersection of AI and UX. And our take on it is that there's a lot of steps on the workflow that could be sort of improved with large language models, of course. What we try to do is we try to make it really easy for you to sort of facilitate research. So we don't necessarily focus on being a repository of sorts. Instead,
Hmm.
what we do is we try to make it really easy for you to get primary data from real humans. So if you want to interview people, we'll essentially have this method that allows you to actually interview people with the help of AI. And what that means is that the things that we're really good at is the things that where it's important to be able to do that really quickly. So, for example, large language models are really good at languages. If you need to interview customers in those different languages, we're really good at facilitating those conversations. Equally, if you need to really quickly turn around something, maybe it's Monday morning, you need to prioritize and get more information about like what to be prioritizing, and you really want to route that and user feedback, what we can do is we can help you get that type of information really quickly because the methods that we use are really fast to sort of deploy. Whereas if you actually have to interview customers, that might take days or a few weeks to turn around. So really a lot of efficiency for us comes in terms of like the speed and scale of what you can use AI methods.
One thing I think we discussed recently is often we have our customers come to us and get us to help with recruiting. Sometimes they're very specialized, like a nanotechnologist in China. But more generally, my understanding is that your tool can help with sort of that entire flow, if I'm right, of identifying participants and moderating and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and I would say to an extent, I think like everyone we ever spoken to has said that recruitment is a challenge, and for some it's more of a challenge than for others. For example, if you're a consumer brand, you might have like a really broad pool of people that you want to reach, and they're easier to find. If you're a B2B brand, then you want to reach like a really specific title or role, that might be much more hard to recruit for. So we integrate with third-party panels to make it easy to recruit from them. We also allow you to sort of recruit in your website. So if it's important for you to reach people from those contexts, and make it really easy for you to do so. But like any panel or any platform, we don't have like complete coverage over the whole. So there's some areas where it's really easy to recruit for participants in our platform, and then of course some areas where it's much harder.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And one of the other things I guess we've talked about, and in your case, it's almost so baked in that it's hard to even describe. But I just wanted you to take a moment to say where are all the pieces that something like AI or machine learning is helping along the way, just so we get a sense. So I certainly don't want your tech secrets, but rather just where it's involved.
Well, I think hopefully will come through once we go through the product. But I think there's been a tendency for tech companies to think about, okay, AI is getting really popular and obviously can do a lot of things. Let's slap on some AI features and we can call it like an AI product. What we've done is we've sort of got back to the drawing board a bit and think about like fundamentally what are the things that now that large language models are really strong and powerful and they can do pretty complex tasks, what are things that like used to not be true that maybe humans had to do every single user interview by themselves that might not be true anymore. So for example, you can use large language models to actually transcribe and understand what a participant is saying, figure out what a good follow-up question is, and then on the fly ask that. Similarly, when we're creating studies, most of our users find it very time consuming to create something that follows best practices. So we also try to use AI to make the study creation process really quickly by letting you sort of describe in natural language what you want to learn about, and then we'll actually build that study for you. Similarly, on analysis, of course, there's tons of different types of tasks and types of analysis you might want to do. And we try to do some of those to just make it easy for you to get insights quickly. I think it's very early days of figuring out how to do this, and everyone's trying to use AI in different ways for it. But we like fundamentally think that with this technology, you kind of have to fundamentally rethink some of the design patterns that you've had and relied on so far.
Yeah, and I agree. And even at our company, we're trying to figure out how we do what is our best role in this new world. So, in speaking of which, I guess I did want to ask, if I have your tool and I'm actively using it, which maybe some of our viewers aren't yet, how would I think about working with it, and how might my work be different as a result of using Wondering?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways you could think about it. One is that it's really a tool at the end of the day. It's not going to do everything for you, of course, and it only really understands what you tell it. So it's really good at getting access to participants because it's tightly integrated into your product experience. But you still have to like run the research studies. You still have to figure out what you want to learn, and then once you've gotten the learnings, you have to go into your company and actually turn them into something that moves the metrics and that moves the needle. So you can partially think about it as a way to get access to those types of insights. And then when you interact with AI features, I would often tend to think about it like a really smart sort of intern or an assistant that only has the context that you give to it. So if you want to instruct it to sort of run a study for you, the more you can sort of give it in terms of context what you want to learn about, the more it can do, and it can do some really powerful things. But it's not something that's going to just go and run and do things on its own. It's not something that's like sort of actually autonomous and can do someone's actual job. It's a smart system that can help you sort of accomplish more, but not more than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows in a few years what these things will be like. But And a lot of folks have thought about, okay, well, if I'm using AI, do I have to worry about like hallucinations or bias or things like that? And maybe you can just tell us how you sort of tune or perfect your wondering to address these issues, or if really they come up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we use AI in the product, it's really to achieve specific tasks that we define. So, for example, if I'm trying to create a study, the outcome is always that we have a study that's created, and it's not that we're just going to accept any type of output that it gives. We really just need a study to be outputted, which means that in a use case like that, hallucination isn't really as much of a problem because we can clearly inspect what it outputs, and we can clearly define if it's right or not. Because if it's in a study format, for example, it will be right. And if it has sort of reasonable study questions, that will be right. But if it does something completely haywire, then we can sort of guard against that. I think often where you really want to make sure you can avoid hallucinations is in the execution phase where you're actually interviewing a participant, or in the sort of analysis phase. And of course, in the analysis phase, there are sort of defined patterns you can follow to make sure that you make it clear that you have countered sort of hallucination. For example, if we provide a summary, we'll then also give you the sources that we built the summary on. So you can actually inspect, okay, here's a theme that's emerged. What is this based off? And then we'll actually give you the sort of raw data to look at. And that makes it clear that you can understand if it's hallucination or if it's not hallucination.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And well, one of the things we'd love to do is take a few moments to have you kind of show us how this works in the scenario you mentioned earlier. So maybe we can work on see if I can set it up so you can share a screen, and
Absolutely.
just take us through some of this.
So what you're seeing now is the dashboard that you're going to land on when you log into Wondering. And I talked a bit about sort of using AI to actually help you create studies, and I thought we'd do that together here. So, I mean, there's tons of things you can use it for. Some of it is very sort of foundational. You're trying to understand who are the people that are going to use the base, what are they trying to achieve, what are the goals, what are the motivations, and what are the opportunities. And sometimes it's very tactical. It might be, okay, they're going through our sign up flow. Some people seem to be dropping off at this specific step in a wizard, and we want to understand like what sort of causes frustration and stuff there. If we use the former, maybe we just want to understand more about sort of people's grocery shopping habits. And what I'll then do is I'll tell it to build a study for me on that topic. So help me understand more about people's most recent grocery shopping experience, and if there's anything they think could have been better about. So in natural language, I essentially describe what my goal is. And over the next 10, 20 seconds, it now builds up a study for you. Essentially, that's geared towards helping you get that information from people. And if you've ever have a survey, the user interface will probably be familiar to you. We tend to think about this as like a semi-structured user interview, really, because you'll go through a series of steps that we're going to go through with every participant. And then within each steps, you can then define if you wanted to ask follow-up questions on the fly. So for example, here, it's going to introduce the study and then ask, can you describe your most recent grocery shopping experience? And where the AI really kicks in is in asking these like follow-up questions, essentially. So for example, if I talk about my most recent grocery shopping experience as a participant here in the preview, you can see that it's asking that question. And so I live in the UK in London, and Sainsbury's is a big store here. So last week I went to Sainsbury's on my way home from work. I was trying to shop for dinner because that's something I often do when I'm commuting home. It was a pretty terrible experience though, because everything I was looking for to buy was actually sold out. Probably because it was really late at night, but I left the store pretty frustrated. So I've expressed a pretty sort of negative sentiment. And what it's going to do is it's going to understand what I'm saying, transcribe that, and then formulate a sort of good follow-up question that digs for more information. So here it's asking about what specific items were you looking for that were sold out. Now, I've never, in setting up the study, actually said that it's going to ask about this, but it's understanding what I'm saying and then digging for more follow-up, for more information through these follow-up questions, essentially. And that's sort of not what you might do in a user interview. Someone said something really interesting, you want to learn more about that. So then go and dig deeper, ask for more information, just like you might do in a user interview.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to ask quickly. Thank you for that. So this is just so sort of viewers get it. This is sort of your testing the set of questions, and you're sort of doing this internally. And then obviously, I would just only see the questions if I was the participant.
Yes, exactly. So if you were an actual participant, what you would see is after I've set the study live, you would see something that looks a bit like this. So it appears almost like a conversational survey, or if you deploy this in product, it would actually appear on top of a website as a little widget. So for the participant, it's a sort of text-based format where you can sort of see questions in text and then you can respond either with audio or.
Oh yeah, really interesting. And I'm guessing that back on when we're on sort of our view, the internal researcher view, we can edit questions or do some sort of tweaking of what it came up with, but it gives you a good first start. Is that appropriate?
Yes, exactly. So that's absolutely right. So really what I showed you here was like the fast way to create a study. Of course, they might not always output exactly the study that you want. So you have full control over actually changing these studies before you start live. So for example, if I don't like this first question I asked, I can just remove it and then add something in instead. That allows you to really speed up the sort of creation process. And if I'm now happy with this study, what I'll do is I'll essentially set it live. So I might deploy this to, let's say, on our website. You can click on our website and then launch it. And now it's actually going to go out to people on your website on the specific sort of part of the application that I specified. And on the back end of that, once users actually start responding, what you'll get is an overview. So you'll get, of course, how people progress through your study. You'll also get sort of individual responses. And this is really like where it actually starts looking like a user interview, because we had to a study that we ran previously. This one was also on sort of grocery shopping habits. If I head to the individual responses, I'll be actually able to see the transcript of every conversation. So, and as you can see, it sort of very much looks like a user interview response. I can actually listen back to it. This one happened to actually happen in Spanish. Sadly, my Spanish is really terrible, but I can now listen back to it in Spanish, see what they said, and then I'll automatically sort of translate back into English as well.
Cool. And do you feel it's sort of subjective, but have you tried? So here's, I guess, what I'm asking is the relative balance of making it awesome for collecting data versus analyzing the data. Do you feel like you have a strength today, or that you're trying to put just as much energy into both? Or I didn't know how you would describe that.
It's a really good question because I think the space of analysis is really deep and there's tons more that we want to do in that space. And I think that's really going to change a lot because a lot of the tasks that are sort of obvious that an AI could do is really in the sort of analysis space. So today we offer some initial analysis that will potentially create clusters of all the conversations that happen. For example, here we're asking about the last time they did grocery shopping, and we've identified some sort of themes based on quotes in conversations that emerge from the data. Of course, there's tons more that you might want to do in terms of your analysis. I think what we are really good at today is sort of conducting those conversations for you, get that primary data to your hand, and do some analysis on it to help you sort of understand what's going on. But then, of course, there's other analysis tasks that you might want to do on top of that.
Mm-hmm. No, makes perfect sense. And I'm sorry, I interjected a couple of questions myself. Are there other things you want to make sure you share?
No, I think that was the main thing we wanted to go through. Of course, if anyone has questions, we're always happy to answer more questions in detail, but that's the main thing we wanted to.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think the thing that strikes me is how fast I can get to a test. And so if it's I don't know, either fairly general or I guess it. Actually, a slightly different question is just with your current clients today, what proportion are doing this just in general, like I might on a early discovery kind of thing, versus using it, as a pop up on their website or some sort of like a spot interview?
It's really a mixture because, of course, what you're the way to deploy this properly, it kind of depends on what you're trying to learn. So if you're selling something to your website, sometimes you want to do research very targeted about like what is the problems in the user experience and about the usability of the product that we have today. Then, of course, doing it contextually and in product is really important. But if you're planning on expanding to a new market or you're trying to do some sort of more non-customer research, then doing in-product research doesn't really matter as much.
Right.
Our customers will really mix and match these ways of recruiting to make sure that they get the right outcome.
Cool. Okay, well, great. Here, I'll try to turn off sharing here, and you can too, and we'll just continue our conversation. Well, thank you. And, I first anticipated that people just wanted to hear what does Wondering do and take a look at it and so on. Um, you know, Maybe you can take a step back. You mentioned that you were, so I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly the product manager, product owner
Yeah.
side of the world. So still being that person versus building a whole product for that enterprise is a big change. What inspired you to get into this and create this for this field?
Well, I think it was, I remember the moment specifically, we tried to do user interviews at the company, and the process for doing that, we had some pretty expensive tools that like allowed you to do video calls with a panel. But when we wanted to speak to customers, it was a really painful process to go through and it was extremely manual. And then we tried to learn from other companies, like how do they do it well? What are the best practices? And we spoke to the likes of Meta and Google and like really established shops all the way down to like small startups and realized that actually everyone just sort of does it the same and it's really manual, it's really time consuming. And it's often like very ineffective in terms of how people have to spend their time and how quickly you can get insights. And we figured like there has to be a better way to more quickly get people insights. And I think obviously large language models have developed, and we don't actually build our own large language models. So a lot of that is thanks to other companies that have done some really phenomenal work in sort of expanding that. But the timing is really good now because the technology really facilitates things that we
Yeah.
couldn't do before. And there's this big problem that no one's really been able to solve essentially. So we think that that's a really exciting time for user research because we're going to be able to do so much more things that actually make people's lives easier because they can actually get these insights in a way that they just couldn't.
Yeah, totally true. And we're evolving. We'll be introducing new services because we can go so much. It's evolved our practice and reduced some of that time-consuming process. Um, well, I did want to ask. You went from a twinkle in your eye to this amazing product. Is there anything that like milestones or achievements along the way that you're like, yeah, I can't, or not that I can't believe I did that, but more just that you're really proud of your company that you were able to do.
I mean, I think it's been really like we always try to push ourselves to understand like is this something that's possible? And I think like truthfully, years ago when we thought like could you potentially use AI for this in capacity, it sounded a bit crazy and it sounded a bit weird. And it's now thanks to the technology actually evolving a lot that it is feasible. Equally, I think most of the work is ahead of us. There's so many things that can happen, and AI is moving really fast. And I think the moment to make you proud is really when you're helping out something, and it's like the team sort of makes it work, and it's something that you might have thought was impossible before. But that's all thanks to like the team and the technology, really, not much to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, that goes to a question I was going to ask, which was, where do you see this? You don't have to, reveal your whole product map, but where do you see this evolving in the next short term for your product, and also how do you see, just the whole enterprise of user research and just product discovery sort of evolving over the next while?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the focus now definitely is how can we take as many of these tasks as possible and make it really easy for researchers to really quickly and effectively get their job done. And there's so many tasks that like on the chopping block that people might not necessarily enjoy and might not be where people want to spend their time, but that we can sort of help them facilitate and do for them and that they can then oversee. And there's tons of things you could think about there that we're considering doing. In the longer term, I think there's obviously like a long view, like will something like AGI develop and then maybe we're all out of a job. But I think in the more maybe more realistic and optimistic, depending on how you see it, view in the midterm, it's hard to predict exactly how it's going to go. And obviously, we're going to be able to do much more complex tasks than we can today with the sort of large language model we have. So in the longer term view, it's really hard to predict where we're going to go.
Yeah, and honestly, part of the reason for us even doing this set of interviews is to make sure that our team keep up and we really understand what's out there and how we can, take advantage of these things. So I appreciate it. Well, really, those were some of the biggest things I wanted to ask. If people wanted to try your tool, can they do a demo, or should they be contacting someone for a product? Sorry, should they do a trial or do a demo? What do you prefer?
Absolutely. So we do trials, so you can sign up at wondering.com for a free trial. And then we'll do an onboarding call with you essentially to help you get set up and test out the platform. So sign up at wondering.com or email me at axel at wondering.com. And then, yeah, always happy chatbot the future of the space, or just help you get set up with your questions.
Very cool. And just one last question was just, are there any surprises about who's been signing up or the sort of uses of your tool? I feel like sometimes you have an anticipated model like your, product owners, product managers, and then you're like, wow, these other people are using it. I never expected that. Is there anything like that that comes to mind?
I think there's a long tail of people that like are experimenting with how can we sort of get the things we do done more quickly. And if you think about like a traditional survey, there's so many people that actually use the survey. It's not just sort of scientists, it's not just sort of user researchers. There's people doing marketing, and there's people trying to understand everything about any kind of user effect, for example. So the same is true for us. Like we focus on the companies that we can help grow by understanding their customers, but anyone that's trying to understand anything about anyone through primary research might be interested in a tool like this, and we did see sort of signups for that as well.
And just what, I'm sorry, I have yet another question for you. Well, just in terms of
Go for it.
wondering, have you? So some folks, let me just give you an example. Some folks have said, yes, we're here for the onesie twosie researcher to help them, amplify their work, and others like we are here for large enterprise. And I didn't know how you are thinking of wondering now or in the future.
So we have customers that are all the way from like startups all the way down, all the way up to sort of big publicly listed companies. And I think it's fundamentally true, like whatever size you are in terms of a company and in terms of the product that you're building, you sort of want to and should be wanting to involve customers in what you're building. Like we've seen many examples of big publicly listed companies that sort of overtie on the road and sort of get stuck because they're not continuously trying to make the product better and rethinking how things are actually changing. But we help companies on both sides of that spectrum. And I think the reason fundamentally for that is like we've never actually spoken in the last sort of years. We've spoken to hundreds of user research teams and product teams. We've never ever spoken to a team that said like we're perfectly resourced. We have all the insights that we need. Usually, user researchers work really hard and they do a really great job. But with AI, we think we can like help them essentially accomplish more. But even with AI, like there's so much stuff that remains to be done. So I think at all sides of the spectrum, yeah, seems to need.
Cool. Well, Axel, thank you so much for sharing Wondering with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, here I'll take it from here. So that's all for today. Thank you, Axel, and thank you for tuning in and keeping up with the latest on AI for UX research and product discovery. Of course, subscribe and like, and let us know in the comments what else you'd like to have us feature next. And wishing you all brilliant insights with AI.